Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that is very common with narcissistic relationships, and that is the person's perception that their relationship is different from other abusive relationships. There's often a perception that abusive relationships only involve certain kinds of abuse, like physical, or that abusive people only behave a certain way. People look at their relationship and the person they're in the relationship with, and they say, this person is different. This relationship is different. It's not the same as that. It can be one of the hardest things to accept that this is, in fact, not true. It doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is, whether it's family, friend, spouse, child. Those in these relationships with a narcissist or other abusive type of person will often say and believe that their circumstances are somehow different from the other abusive relationships they've seen or heard about. They may think their circumstances are special or that the abuser has some kind of mitigating factor going on that makes it different, unique, and not like other abusive relationships. She says hurtful things, but she's had a hard life. It's not the same as Bobby's situation. Bobby's wife is just mean. He hits me, but he's got emotional problems. He's not like those guys on the TV movies. He has a real problem. Mom puts me down, but Grandma was the same way, and that's the only way Mom knows how to parent. She's not doing it to hurt me or be cruel like those mothers that abuse their children. She just doesn't know any better. The idea seems to be that abusers are mean and hateful just for the sake of being mean and hateful. So if someone seems to have a problem or a history that explains their behavior or seems to excuse it somehow, they're not a real abuser. They are somehow different. This is just not true. Every single person in every single abusive relationship thought this exact same thing. It's different. He's different. She's different. I'm different. This isn't the same as those other terrible relationships I've seen or heard about. This person can be nice sometimes. They seem sorry. They have other problems. They have reasons. But all abusers have reasons. All abusers have problems. All abusers have excuses. It's not different. And while most people are happy to find that they're not alone, it can be hurtful and even shocking to realize that everybody has the same story as you do. Everyone thought their relationship was different and special and therefore not subject to the, quote, rules of real abusive relationships. Everyone knows that when a relationship has been identified as abusive, it should be ended because abuse is wrong. The whole thing ends up being rationalized. Yes, I know we should leave abusive relationships, but he's not really abusive. He's damaged. He's suffering. He's sorry. Yes, I know we're not supposed to put up with abuse, but this is different. She's had a really hard life. She needs help. Part of this is denial, and part of it is because in some ways people have been conditioned to believe that a person cannot be both a victim and an abuser. This is not the case. Many abusers have had a legitimately hard life. Many abusers have a genuine sad story, and most really were victims at one time. These things often explain their behavior, but they do not excuse or mitigate it, ever. Just because there's an explanation for something doesn't mean that it's excused. A person can usually explain why they gave themselves permission to murder another human being, but that doesn't mean it's okay that they did that or that they will now face no consequences just because they had a reason. Suffering abuse is no excuse for abusing other people who had absolutely nothing to do with that. All too often, this is the justification that's given, and all too often, it's accepted. This happens because people see the person they live with or the person that they know. They can often see that this person really was a victim, or that they really are suffering, or that they really do have other problems that may be pretty significant. And people have been conditioned to believe that if someone is a victim, things are not their fault. Therefore, they can't be an abuser. So they accept these justifications for abuse, which is all they really are. The problem here is the misunderstanding of responsibility. No one is ever to blame for being abused, and there are absolutely no exceptions to that. None. No one is ever responsible for or in control of another person's actions. Ever. However, that doesn't mean that the person's own actions are also not their responsibility. If someone was abused as a child, that does not make their own abusive actions as an adult somehow not their responsibility. Abuse is often a cycle in families, and it only stops happening if someone stops it, starting with themselves. Sometimes the explanation for abuse is that the abuser doesn't realize their behavior is hurtful or not okay. While this is usually not true, even if it were true, how does that make it okay to stay committed to the relationship? Ignorance is only an excuse one time. After you've told someone that their behavior is hurting or bothering you, they know better. If they don't stop, they don't care. It's as simple as that. If there were a situation where someone really couldn't stop or truly couldn't understand, then the relationship is still toxic because they're still behaving in a manner that does not respect or consider the other person. It doesn't really matter whether abuse or toxic behavior is intentional or not, because it affects people the same way. For the record, though, most abusers are aware that their behavior is hurtful. They don't care. At least in the moment when they are doing it, they don't care, and that is when it really matters. Being sorry later is great and all, but if it doesn't stop somebody from behaving that way in the first place, it doesn't really matter. What we often find is that abusers regret the consequences of their actions rather than the actions themselves. This is why the supposed remorse usually only shows up when they are actually faced with these consequences. If there are no consequences, there's often no remorse. They are sorry their actions led to the consequence, they're not sorry for the action itself. If it hadn't led to that consequence, then it probably wouldn't matter. In other words, I'm sorry I did this because it has led to this consequence that I don't like. They're not sorry because they feel what they did was wrong. It only becomes wrong when it leads to an outcome that they don't want. The consequence is also often resented hugely, and the victim may be punished for having feelings or being human. The truth is, this is a very old story, and it's one that has played itself out over and over and over again. The idea that the relationship is different and therefore fixable or otherwise salvageable can be a big part of what keeps people in these relationships for so long. Sadly, the outcome is always the same. We often say, hurt people, and it's true, but that's an explanation, it's not an excuse. Hurt people may hurt people, but that doesn't mean they have the right to. It just means they've made the choice to. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via email, via Skype, and Messenger. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to go ahead and do that. I teach workshops a few times a month, so if you're interested in seeing what we're running at this time, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org and shamanspiritcenter.com. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.